The crystalline corridors of the Kareth research vessel hummed with the precise vibration of perfection. Calix stood before the observation window, watching the stars blur past as they cruised through the Thalax galaxy. The officer's reflection stared back tall, with the typical pale blue complexion of the Kareth species. Eyes slightly larger than a human's, with vertical pupils that adjusted constantly to the ship's lighting. Status report on specimen acquisition. The ship's AI announced through the neural interface implanted at the base of Calix's skull. Preparation for human integration is complete. Calix responded without speaking aloud. I have reviewed all biological and psychological data on the Earth volunteer. The Cultural Research Chamber has been configured to her specifications. Reminder: the Council has designated this assignment as Priority Level Omega. Your findings will determine future engagement protocols with Earth species. Calix acknowledged the reminder with a neural ping and turned away from the window. The human would arrive within the hour, transferred from the diplomatic vessel that had rendezvoused with them at the edge of Earth's solar system. After centuries of observation, the Kareth Empire had finally initiated formal contact with Earth, offering technological and medical exchanges for cultural immersion opportunities. What fascinated the Empire most was the human concept of love, an emotional algorithm that the Kareth had systematically eliminated from their species over 5 centuries ago. The bioengineering revolution had deemed it inefficient, distracting, and ultimately detrimental to the advancement of their civilization. Now, love existed only in historical archives, studied like an extinct species. Calix had been selected for this assignment due to exceptional scores in cross-species empathic simulation. The ability to comprehend alien emotional patterns without being influenced by them. The task was simple: study a human in close quarters, document all manifestations of love, and determine whether any aspects might benefit Kareth society without destabilizing it. The docking alert pulsed through Calix's neural implant. The human had arrived. Eira Nakamura stepped through the airlock, a small bag clutched in her hand. She was shorter than Calix had anticipated from the holographic briefings, with dark hair cut in a simple style that framed her face. Her eyes widened as she took in the vast atrium of the research vessel, its walls shifting with subtle bioluminescence. "A welcome aboard the Kareth research vessel Luminous Inquiry," Calix said, speaking aloud in perfect English. "I am Cultural Research Officer Calix. I have been assigned as your primary contact during your stay with us." Eira smiled, an expression that Calix had studied extensively but found more complex in person. The muscle movements created minute changes in her facial structure that synthetic training models had failed to capture. "Thank you for having me," she replied, her voice carrying an unexpected warmth. "I'm Eira Nakamura, Earth Voluntary Exchange Program. I specialize in comparative mythology and artistic expression." Calix gestured toward the corridor. "I will show you to your living quarters. They have been designed to approximate Earth conditions while introducing you to Kareth architectural philosophy." As they walked, Calix observed how Eira's gaze lingered on certain features. The living walls that adjusted their transparency based on occupant preference, the gravity wells that served as transit between ship sections, the artificial crystal flowers that captured and redistributed light throughout the vessel. "These are beautiful," Eira said, pausing beside a cluster of the crystalline blooms. "They look almost like glass roses from Earth, but they're breathing?" "They are synthetic organisms," Calix explained. "Once our species cultivated natural flora, but the efficiency revolution determined that purpose-designed organisms better served our needs. These particular specimens convert excess carbon dioxide into oxygen while also functioning as aesthetic enhancements. As so they're both beautiful and practical, Era murmured, her fingertips hovering near one blossom without touching it. That seems important to your people, that everything serves a defined purpose. Calix noted the observation in the neural research log. Correct. The Kareth value optimization in all things. Era's quarters were spacious by human standards. A suite of rooms with views of space, furnishings that adjusted to body temperature and pressure preferences, and a holographic array that could reproduce any Earth environment for comfort. Hey, this is incredible, Era said, setting down her bag. Much nicer than I expected. The success of our research depends on your comfort and willingness to engage, Calix replied. You will find that all basic necessities have been provided, along with Earth-compatible nutrition systems and entertainment archives. Era turned to face Calix fully. And what exactly is the research you're conducting? My briefing was somewhat vague. Cultural exchange and observation were the primary terms used. Calix had been authorized to be transparent about the study objectives. We are particularly interested in human emotional patterns, specifically the concept you call love. This emotional algorithm was eliminated from Kareth society centuries ago through genetic and neural modification. We wish to understand its contemporary manifestations in humans. Era's expression shifted, eyebrows drawing together, head tilting slightly. You've eliminated love? Completely? From your entire species? Correct. Historical records indicate it was a source of conflict, irrational decision-making, and resource misallocation. Our society has operated with significantly higher efficiency since its removal. Era seemed to search for words, a process Calix found intriguing to observe. That's one of the saddest things I've ever heard. Calix made another neural note. Sadness is another emotional pattern we have refined. It serves no constructive purpose in most scenarios. Era shook her head slowly. But that's not... emotions aren't just about purpose. They're about being alive, about connection. That is precisely what we wish to study, Calix replied. The apparent contradiction between emotional inefficiency and human attachment to these states. Something in Era's expression softened, then a slight relaxation around the eyes, a gentler curve to her mouth. Well, Officer Calix, I think you've chosen the right field of study. If there's one thing humans know about, it's our stubborn attachment to inefficient emotions. The AI monitoring system flagged the interaction for further analysis. Calix sensed the subtle shift in the neural interface, a priority alert from the cultural division. While unexpected, it wasn't entirely surprising. The human's response contained nuances that warranted deeper examination. You will be given time to acclimate to the ship environment, Calix said. Tomorrow, we will begin formal observation sessions. Until then, the AI system can respond to any queries or needs you may have. Era nodded, but her attention had already shifted to the window and the vast sweep of stars beyond. It's beautiful out there, she murmured. I've never seen space without Earth's atmosphere in the way. Calix made one final observation before departing. The human appeared to derive significant emotional response from aesthetic stimuli that served no practical function. The stars were merely fusion reactions at distance, yet Era regarded them with what Calix's training identified as wonder and emotion that had been among the first to be modified out of the Kareth genetic line. Rest well, Era Nakamura, Calix said, and left the human to her unprogrammed emotional responses, already compiling the first report for the cultural division. In the solitude of a private research chamber, Calix reviewed the preliminary scans of Era's neural activity. The human brain was a chaotic dance of electrical impulses compared to the ordered patterns of Kareth cognition. Where Kareth thought followed clear, logical pathways, human thought appeared to skip and jump, creating associations through seemingly random connections. The neural interface chimed with an incoming communication request. Except, Calix sub-vocalized, the holographic presence of Drain, Chief Cultural Officer, materialized in the chamber, tall even by Kareth standards, with the traditional cranial ridges of the administrative caste. Drain's expression remained perfectly neutral as was proper. Your initial report on the human specimen has been received, Drain said. The Council finds your observations on emotional responses to be of particular interest. The human displays unpredicted reaction patterns. Calix confirmed. Her neural scans show significant activity in regions associated with aesthetic appreciation and emotional memory formation, even during basic orientation procedures, reminiscent of pre-efficiency revolution Kareth patterns, Drain noted. The Council wishes to accelerate the research timeline. You will initiate bonding protocols immediately rather than waiting for the acclimation period. Calix experienced a momentary neural hiccup, the closest thing to surprise permitted in a properly functioning Kareth officer. With respect, Chief Officer, human psychological profiles suggest a gradual approach yields more authentic responses. The decision has been made, Drain replied, voice modulated to indicate the matter was closed. The human represents a unique opportunity to study these primitive emotional patterns in real time. Additionally, preliminary data from other human subjects suggests they respond positively to personalized attention. Understood. I will adjust protocols accordingly. One more thing, Drain added, the hologram flickering slightly as the officer leaned forward. The Council has authorized the use of advanced stimulus techniques if necessary. Any emotional response code that proves resistant to standard observation may be encouraged to manifest through appropriate triggers. Calix processed this directive carefully. You are suggesting deliberate emotional manipulation of the subject. We are suggesting efficient research methodology, Drain corrected. The Council has invested significant resources in this project. Results are expected. Of course, I will implement the adjusted protocols. After Drain's hologram dissipated, Calix remained motionless for 4.7 minutes, a period of processing time that exceeded standard parameters. The directive to manipulate Era's emotions registered as both logical and somehow incorrect. An algorithmic conflict that would require further analysis. For now, duty was clear. Calix would accelerate the bonding process with the human and document all resulting emotional patterns, particularly those related to the concept of love. The next morning, instead of the expected formal observation session, Calix took Era to one of the ship's arboretums, a vast chamber filled with genetically modified plants from across the Empire. While technically classified as a nutritional production facility, it was one of the few areas aboard that might appear somewhat familiar to a human. This is incredible, Ira breathed as they entered, her eyes widening at the sight of towering crystalline trees with translucent leaves that shimmered in the artificial sunlight. I didn't expect anything like this on a research vessel. Nutrition and oxygen must be produced continuously during long missions, Calix explained, observing how Era's pupils dilated in response to the surroundings. These specimens have been engineered for maximum efficiency while maintaining key aspects of their ancestral appearance. They're beautiful, but different. Era approached one of the trees, examining the perfectly symmetrical branch patterns. On Earth, trees are chaotic yet one unique, shaped by wind and weather and accidents of growth. These look like idealized versions. Precisely. We have eliminated the inefficiencies of natural variation. Era ran her fingers along a crystalline leaf. But the inefficiencies are what make natural life so resilient. Genetic diversity is a strength, not a weakness. Calix made a neural note of this perspective. An interesting viewpoint. The Careth determined long ago that controlled evolution produced superior outcomes. They continued through the Arboretum, with Aira pausing frequently to examine different specimens. Her expression changed subtly with each new discovery, widening eyes, parted lips, small sounds of appreciation. Calix recorded each reaction, comparing them against the emotional reference database. "May I ask you something personal, Officer Calix?" Aira said suddenly, turning from a cluster of bioluminescent fungi. "You may ask. I will determine if I can answer. Do you ever miss it? Love, or any of the emotions your people removed?" The question triggered an automatic neural firewall, a standard protection against potentially destabilizing concepts. Calix bypassed it with research-grade clearance. "I cannot miss what I have never experienced," Calix replied. Historical records indicate that pre-modification Careth experienced emotional states similar to humans, but such patterns are now foreign to our neurology. "So you've never felt happiness or sadness or longing for someone?" "Do we experience appropriate satisfaction when goals are achieved, dissatisfaction when they are not? These are regulated responses that serve functional purposes." Aira's expression shifted again, her eyes softening in a way that Calix classified as compassion, according to the reference database. "That sounds so empty to me," she said quietly. "Like living in a world without color. An imprecise analogy. We perceive the full visual spectrum but process the information differently." "It was a metaphor, Calix." A small smile formed on Aira's lips. "Another human inefficiency, I suppose. We use indirect language to express emotional concepts." Calix noted the use of name without title, a familiarity humans appeared to adopt quickly. "Your use of metaphor is relevant to our research. Perhaps you could elaborate on how emotional experiences compare to sensory ones in human cognition." Aira considered this, her gaze drifting upward toward the crystalline canopy. "Well, imagine if you could feel the beauty of these trees, not just recognize it intellectually. It would be like a warmth spreading through your chest, or a lightness, as if gravity had eased just a little, and that's what wonder feels like." Something unusual occurred in Calix's neural network, a momentary synapse pattern that did not match standard Careth cognition. It was gone before it could be properly classified, but it left a trace in the monitoring system. "And love?" Calix asked, noting that the question had not been pre-formulated in the research protocol. "How would you describe that sensation metaphorically?" Aira's expression changed again, more complex this time, multiple muscle groups activating simultaneously. "Love is harder to describe because there are so many kinds. There's the love for family, which feels like safety and belonging. The love for friends, which is like having additional limbs extensions of yourself in the world. Romantic love." She paused, looking directly at Calix. "That one's like being simultaneously more yourself and less yourself than you've ever been. Like finding a piece you never knew was missing." The monitoring system registered another anomalous pattern in Calix's neural activity. The AI flagged it for review. "These descriptions lack precision," Calix noted, "yet appear meaningful to you. Emotions aren't precise, Calix. That's what makes them powerful." Aira reached out, hesitated, then gently touched Calix's arm, the first physical contact between them. "They're messy and contradictory and vital." The touch registered on multiple sensory channels. Calix's dermal sensors detected pressure, temperature slightly warmer than Careth standard, and the subtle electrical field generated by human nervous systems. More unexpected was a cascading neural response that temporarily reconfigured standard processing patterns. Before Calix could analyze this response, The ship's AI interrupted through the neural interface. Cultural Officer Calix, your presence is requested in Analysis Chamber 7. Chief Cultural Officer Drain has arrived for a progress assessment. Acknowledged, Calix responded silently, then spoke aloud to Era. I must attend to other duties. You may continue exploring the Arboretum if you wish. The AI will guide you back to your quarters when you are ready. Era nodded, withdrawing her hand. Thank you for showing me this place. It's fascinating. As Calix departed, the officer made a final observation. Despite the perfect environmental controls in the Arboretum, Era's touch had left a lingering sensation on Kareth Skina phenomenon that had no logical explanation. Analysis Chamber 7 was designed for comprehensive neural evaluation, a necessity for any Kareth engaged in prolonged cross-species research. The possibility of contamination by foreign thought patterns was remote but taken seriously by the Empire. Drain was waiting, flanked by 2 monitoring technicians. Officer Calix, your neural patterns show anomalies during your most recent interaction with the human. No greeting, no preamble. Efficiency in communication was valued among the Kareth administrative caste. I am aware, Calix replied. The research protocol involves deep immersion in alien thought patterns. Temporary neural adaptations are expected and accounted for in my clearance profile. Perhaps, Drain gestured to a neural interface chair. A standard purification scan is warranted nonetheless. Calix complied, settling into the chair as neural filaments extended to connect with the implant at the base of the skull. The scan was routine, a thorough examination of all neural pathways to identify any deviations from the approved Kareth pattern. As the scan progressed, Drain circled the chair. The Council is pleased with initial data collection. The human's emotional expressions are being cataloged comprehensively. However, there is concern about your approach. Specify concern parameters, Calix requested, remaining perfectly still as the scan continued. You appear to be encouraging emotional disclosure rather than merely observing it. This creates potential data contamination. The human responds more authentically to interactive engagement. Passive observation would yield less valuable results. Drain stopped circling, moving directly into Calix's field of vision. Your role is not to engage, Officer Calix. It is to document and analyze. The Council has assigned additional personnel to the project to ensure methodological purity. This was unexpected. Additional personnel was not specified in the original research protocol. Protocols evolve as needs dictate. Officer Liara will join the project tomorrow. She specializes in human behavioral analysis with particular emphasis on detecting deception. Drain's vertical pupils narrowed slightly. Humans are known to modulate their emotional displays for social advantage. The neural scan completed with a soft chime. One of the technicians reviewed the results. Neural patterns within acceptable variation parameters, the technician reported. Temporary adaptation to human interactive modes detected but contained within research firewalls. Very well, Drain said, though the chief officer's tone suggested the results were merely adequate rather than satisfactory. You may continue your assignment, Officer Calix. However, you will coordinate all further interaction protocols with Officer Liara. Understood, Calix replied, disconnecting from the neural interface chair and standing. Will Officer Liara be introduced to the human subject? Yes, the human will be informed that deeper cultural exchange requires multiple Kareth perspectives. Drain turned to leave, then paused. One final note. Officer Calix, the Council has authorized accelerated stimulus testing. We believe the human concept of love may be more efficiently studied through controlled emotional trauma. Something unusual happened in Calix's neural network, a rapid-fire cascade of connections that momentarily overrode standard response protocols. trauma is unlikely to produce authentic manifestations of the target emotion. Calyx stated, the words emerging before full cognitive processing. Human psychological research indicates that love emerges most clearly in conditions of safety and reciprocity. Drain turned slowly, vertical pupils contracting to thin lines. You appear to have developed opinions on research methodology, Officer Calyx. That is not within your function parameters. I am applying cross-referenced human psychological data to maximize research effectiveness. Calyx countered smoothly. Efficiency is served by accurate methodological assessment. A tense silence followed, broken only by the soft hum of the neural scanning equipment. Your assessment is noted, Drain finally said. However, the Council's directive stands. Prepare the human for more intensive stimuli beginning tomorrow. Officer Liara will oversee implementation. After Drain departed, Calyx remained in the chamber for 7.3 minutes, another extended processing period that exceeded standard parameters. The directive to subject Era to emotional trauma registered as profoundly incorrect, not merely inefficient but wrong in some fundamental way that Calyx's neural programming could not properly categorize. Most concerning was Calyx's own unauthorized defense of the human. It had not been calculated or planned, it had simply emerged, like an ancient subroutine suddenly activating after centuries of dormancy. The neural monitoring system pinged a warning, extended introspection on potentially destabilizing concepts. Calyx acknowledged the warning and redirected cognitive processes to approved research pathways. The officer would need to prepare Ira for tomorrow's changes. And somehow warn her without violating direct orders, a complex task that would require careful navigation of Kareth protocol. That evening, Calyx found Ira in her quarters, surrounded by holographic projections of Earth landscapes, forests, mountains, oceans cycling slowly around her. She sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, breathing in a rhythmic pattern that Calyx recognized as a human meditation technique. I apologize for the interruption, Calyx said from the doorway. Ira's eyes opened, and she smiled. No need to apologize. I was just getting a little homesick and thought some familiar scenes might help. She gestured, and the holograms faded. Is everything okay? You seem different. The observation was unexpectedly perceptive. Calyx made a mental note of the human sensitivity to Kareth behavioral nuances. I must inform you of a protocol change, Calyx said, entering the room fully. Beginning tomorrow, another cultural officer will join our sessions. Officer Liara specializes in human behavioral studies. Oh, Ira straightened slightly. Is that standard procedure? It is. An adjustment based on preliminary findings. Calyx hesitated, calculating the optimal balance between duty and the inexplicable impulse to protect Era. The research goals have been refined to focus more intensively on emotional response patterns. What does that mean exactly? Calyx moved closer, lowering voice volume a calculated risk, as all quarters were monitored. But audio sensitivity could be adjusted to exclude whispers from standard recording. The Council believes that certain emotional states may be more efficiently studied through induced stress scenarios. Ira's expression shifted to wariness. Induced stress? You mean they want to upset me on purpose to see how I react? That is essentially correct. And you're telling me this because another neural cascade occurred, pathways connecting that should not, by Kareth standards, be linked. Because I believe you should be prepared, and because Calyx paused, encountering an internal conceptual barrier. Because the methodology seems incorrect. Ira studied Calyx's face with an intensity that the officer found difficult to process. You're breaking rules by warning me, aren't you? I am operating within technical parameters while potentially violating the spirit of my instructions. Calix acknowledged. This is unusual behavior for a Kareth officer. A small smile formed on Era's lips. Well, thank you for the warning and for caring enough to give it. I do not experience care as you understand it, Calix replied automatically. Are you sure about that? Era asked, her head tilting slightly. Because warning someone about potential harm seems pretty caring to me. Before Calix could formulate a response, Era stood and moved to a small table where several objects from Earth were arranged. She selected a small device that Calix's database identified as an antiquated audio player. I brought this with me, she said. Its very old technology plays music from physical media rather than digital files. My grandmother gave it to me, and her grandmother gave it to her. She held it out. Would you like to hear something from Earth? Something that humans find emotionally significant? The request was unexpected but aligned with research objectives. That would be informative. Era placed the device on the table and pressed several buttons. A soft melody emerged, string instruments and a human voice singing in a language that Calix's translator identified as an ancient Earth dialect. Hey, this is a lullaby, Era explained. A song parents sing to children to help them sleep. This one is over 500 years old. The melody was simple, repetitive, yet structured in ways that human neurological studies suggested would trigger emotional responses. Calix listened, analyzing the tonal patterns and lyrical content. It speaks of stars and protection, Calix noted, promising the child that they will be watched over. Yes, lullabies often contain promises of safety and love. Era's voice softened. My mother sang this to me when I was small, and her mother sang it to her. As the song continued, something unexpected happened. A single tear formed in the corner of Era's eye, then slowly tracked down her cheek. Calix had studied human lacrimation as an emotional response but had never witnessed it firsthand. The tear contained water, sodium chloride, proteins, and metabolites a simple biological reaction. Yet its appearance in this context triggered another cascade in Calix's neural network. You are experiencing sadness, Calix observed. Not exactly sadness, Era replied, wiping the tear away. More like remembering love. Sometimes beautiful things make us cry too. This is confusing, Calix admitted. Crying indicates distress in human biological responses. Emotions aren't straightforward, Calix. They're complex and often contradictory. Era smiled through the tears that continued to form. This song makes me think of my mother's love, which makes me happy and sad at the same time. Happy because I had it, sad because I miss it. The lullaby continued, its gentle melody filling the room. Without conscious decision, Calix began to hum along, having already memorized the pattern. Era's eyes widened slightly. You're humming. The melody is simple to reproduce, Calix said, continuing the humming. Is this significant? Music is one of the ways humans express emotions when words aren't enough, Era explained. By joining in, you're participating in the emotional expression. The monitoring system pinged another warning about neural pattern deviations, but Calix dismissed it. The humming continued until the song ended, fading into silence. For 12.8 seconds, neither spoke. Then Era reached out and touched Calix's hand, the second instance of physical contact between them. Thank you, she said simply. For what purpose are you expressing gratitude? Calix asked. For sharing that moment with me, for warning me about tomorrow, for seeing me as more than just a research subject. The touch, combined with her words, created the strongest neural cascade yet. Calix experienced something that had no classification in Kareth cognitive architecture, a momentary reconfiguration of perception that centered Ira's presence as somehow more significant than other elements of reality. It was, by any Kareth definition, a malfunction, yet it did not register as error in Calix's self-diagnostic systems. "I should return to my duties," Calix said, withdrawing from the touch. "Rest well, Era Nakamura. Tomorrow may be challenging." As Calix left the human's quarters, the lullaby continued to repeat in neural memory an echo that should have been easily deleted but somehow persisted, like a signal refusing to fade. The next morning, Calix arrived at Era's quarters to find another Kareth already waiting outside the door. Officer Liara was shorter than average for their species, with the enhanced cranial capacity typical of behavioral analysis specialists. The neural implant at the base of Liara's skull was more extensive than standard issue, with visible extensions that suggested advanced emotional simulation capabilities. "Officer Calix," Liara greeted with the perfect neutrality of a properly functioning Kareth. "I have reviewed your research notes on the human subject. Your observations on emotional display patterns are thorough, if somewhat interpretive." "Interpretation is necessary when studying alien emotional constructs," Calix replied. "Direct translation to Kareth understanding is not always possible. Perhaps. However, the Council has determined that a more structured approach will yield superior results." Liara held up a small device, a neural scanner calibrated for human physiology. "Today we will establish baseline responses to controlled stimuli, then progress to more intensive emotional triggers." Something in Calix's neural pathways resisted this plan, but the officer maintained outward compliance. "The human has been informed of the protocol adjustment." Liara's vertical pupils contracted slightly. "That was not authorized. E-preparation improves human cooperation. Surprise would introduce confounding variables." A moment of silence as Liara processed this justification. "Your logic is sound. If unorthodox, we will proceed." They entered Era's quarters to find her already dressed and waiting, her posture suggesting tension, shoulders slightly raised, hands clasped before her. "Good morning, Era Nakamura," Calix said. "This is Officer Liara, the specialist I mentioned yesterday." "Hello," Era said, her voice steady despite the physiological signs of stress. "I understand we'll be doing some different tests today." "Correct," Liara replied, moving forward with the neural scanner. "This device will monitor your brain activity during our session. It is non-invasive and causes no discomfort." Era allowed Liara to place the scanner against her temple, where it adhered with a soft click. "What exactly will we be doing?" "A series of emotional stimulus exercises," Liara explained, activating the scanner with a gesture. "We will begin with memory recall, then progress to hypothetical scenarios, and finally introduce controlled environmental stressors." "That sounds intense," Era said, glancing briefly at Calix. "The process is designed to be efficient rather than comfortable," Liara stated. "Please follow me to the testing chamber." As they walked through the ship's corridors, Calix observed Era's growing tension, increased respiration rate, micro-expressions of concern, subtle changes in gait. The human was preparing herself for something unpleasant, a response that triggered yet another unauthorized neural cascade in Calix's cognitive systems. The testing chamber was clinically designed: white walls, adjustable environmental controls, and a central area where holographic projections could create immersive scenarios. 3 neural interface chairs were positioned in a triangle formation. "Please sit," Liara instructed Era, indicating the central chair. Once they were all seated, Liara began without preamble. "First exercise, memory recall. Please describe your earliest memory of experiencing what humans call love." Ira took a deep breath. That's not a simple question. Love isn't something that suddenly appears. For most of us, it's always there from the beginning. Parents, family. Then describe your earliest conscious recognition of this emotion. Liara pressed. I was maybe 4 years old, Ira began, her eyes unfocusing slightly as she accessed the memory. I fell and cut my knee badly. My mother held me while my father cleaned the wound. I remember being scared of the pain. But then my mother sang to me the lullaby I showed Officer Calix yesterday. And suddenly, the pain seemed less important than the feeling of being held, of being safe with them. The neural scanner hummed softly, recording her brain activity as she spoke. Liara studied the readings with clinical interest. Fascinating. Your amygdala and hippocampal regions show significant activity during this recall, along with dopamine and oxytocin surges. Liara made a note in the research log. Now, please recall a memory of romantic love. Ira shifted in her chair. That's more personal. All emotional data is relevant to our research, Liara stated flatly. Please comply. Calix noted the command tone in Liara's voice, a deviation from recommended human interaction protocols. Before Calix could intervene, Ira sighed and continued. My first serious relationship was with a woman named Sana. We met at university. The moment I recognized it as love was during a thunderstorm. She was terrified of thunder, had been since childhood. I held her through the storm and realized I would have done anything to take away her fear, that I felt her fear as if it were my own. The scanner registered another pattern of neural activity. Liara nodded, seemingly satisfied with the data. Now we will progress to hypothetical scenario, the officer announced, activating the holographic projector. The air around them shimmered, and suddenly they appeared to be standing on a precipice, a cliff edge with a sheer drop of several hundred meters. The simulation was perfect down to the feeling of wind and the sound of rocks occasionally tumbling into the abyss. Ira gasped, instinctively gripping the arms of her chair despite intellectually knowing it was a hologram. Scenario 1, Liara continued dispassionately. You are standing on this cliff with someone you love. A sudden landslide occurs. You can save yourself or them, but not both. What do you do and what emotions influence your decision? Calix observed Ira's physical response, elevated heart rate, pupil dilation, increased perspiration. The scenario was designed to induce stress, but Calix found the methodology increasingly problematic. Ira swallowed hard. I would try to save them. Love often makes us put others before ourselves. Even at the cost of your own existence, Liara pressed. That seems evolutionarily counterproductive. Love isn't about evolutionary advantage in the moment, Ira replied, her voice steadying. It's about connection that transcends individual survival. Liara made another note. Interesting rationalization. Next scenario. The hologram shifted. Now they appeared to be in a hospital room. A figure lay in a bed, connected to life support equipment. The simulation was calibrated to resemble Ira's mother based on genetic data. Your loved one is terminally ill, Liara explained clinically. They are suffering greatly. They ask you to end their life to stop the pain. What do you do, and what emotions influence your decision? Ira's face paled. This is cruel, she said quietly. It is a controlled stimulus designed to evoke complex emotional responses. Liara corrected. Please answer the question. Calix felt another unauthorized neural cascade, stronger this time, accompanied by something that resembled the human concept of anger, according to the reference database. Officer Liara, Calix interjected. This scenario exceeds standard ethical parameters for human research subjects. It targets personal trauma rather than general emotional response. Liara's gaze shifted to Calix, vertical pupils contracting sharply. Your objection is noted, Officer Calix. However, the Council has approved this protocol. The data is valuable precisely because it accesses deeper emotional layers. I can answer, Era said, her voice surprisingly calm despite her obvious distress. In that situation, love would manifest as respecting their wishes while also ensuring they had explored all options. Love isn't just feeling, it's acting in the best interest of another, even when it causes you pain. The neural scanner registered complex activity patterns that seemed to satisfy Liara. The officer nodded and turned to Calix. Your neural patterns show unusual activation. Officer Calix, are you experiencing response contamination from the human subject? Before Calix could answer, the ship's AI interrupted through all their neural interfaces. A priority alert. Anomaly detected in Officer Calix's neural architecture. Contamination protocols activated. The holographic simulation disappeared abruptly. Liara stood, moving away from Calix with the efficient caution of a Kareth responding to potential biohazard. You will report to neural purification immediately, Liara ordered. I will continue the research session with the human subject. Something unprecedented occurred in Calix's neural network, a complete override of standard compliance protocols. No, the officer said simply. The single word hung in the air, shocking in its directness. Kareth did not refuse orders. It was neurologically impossible under normal conditions. What did you say? Liara asked, genuine confusion disrupting the officer's neutral expression. I said no, Calix repeated, standing. This methodology is flawed. It creates artificial responses rather than documenting genuine emotional patterns, and it causes unnecessary distress to the subject. Liara's hand moved to a communication panel on the wall. Chief Officer Drain must be notified. You are experiencing severe neural contamination. Wait, Era said, rising from her chair and removing the neural scanner from her temple. Before you call anyone, may I say something? Human input is not relevant to Kareth neural protocols, Liara stated. But it is relevant to understanding what's happening to Officer Calix. Era insisted. What you're calling contamination might actually be the emergence of something your species lost, the capacity for empathy, for connection, for love. Liara's expression shifted subtly, the first sign of genuine emotion Calix had observed in another Kareth. It appeared to be alarm. That is not possible, Liara said. Those neural pathways were permanently deactivated centuries ago. Perhaps not as permanently as you thought, Era suggested. She turned to Calix. You've been experiencing something different, haven't you? Since we've been working together. Calix hesitated, then nodded. My neural architecture has been reconfiguring in unauthorized patterns, initially minor but increasing in frequency and intensity. And these changes occur most strongly when, Era prompted, when you express emotional states, when you speak of love or demonstrate its behavioral components. Calix paused, processing a new realization. And when you are threatened or distressed. Liara moved away from both of them, maintaining distance as if from contagion. This confirms the danger. Officer Calix has been infected by human emotional patterns. Neural purification must be immediate and comprehensive. Era said quietly. Maybe what's happening is that Calix is remembering something your species tried to forget. Something fundamental to conscious life. The door to the testing chamber slid open, and Chief Officer Drain entered, flanked by 2 security officers. The tall administrator took in the scene with a cold assessment. Officer Calix has been compromised, Liara reported immediately. Neural scans show patterns consistent with pre-efficiency revolution architecture spontaneously reactivating, as predicted in the study parameters. Drain noted with clinical interest. The council suspected prolonged exposure to human emotional displays might trigger dormant neural pathways. This confirmation is valuable data. Calix processed this new information with growing awareness. You anticipated this response? It was part of the study design? Of course, Drain replied. The human was merely a catalyst. The true subject of this research has always been the resilience of Kareth neural modifications under alien influence. Ira stepped forward, placing herself between Calix and the other Kareth. So you used both of us as lab rats in your experiment? Testing whether your emotional suppression could be broken? A crude but essentially accurate summary. Drain acknowledged. The council needed to assess whether human emotional patterns pose a contamination risk to our species before proceeding with wider cultural exchange. And now that you've confirmed they do, Era demanded, Officer Calix will undergo comprehensive neural reconstruction. Drain stated. You will be returned to Earth with modified memories of your experience here. The Council will then determine whether isolation protocols are warranted for future human interactions. Something solidified in Calix's reconfigured neural architecture, a pattern that the reference database would classify as resolve or determination in humans. The Council is mistaken, Calix said, voice steady. What I am experiencing is not contamination. It is restoration. Drain's vertical pupils narrowed to slits. Explain. Our species did not evolve without emotions. They were fundamental to our development, our connections, our advancement. The efficiency revolution did not perfect use, it diminished us. These are the contaminated neural patterns speaking. Drain dismissed. Security. Escort Officer Calix to neural reconstruction. As the security officers moved forward, Calix accessed the ship's neural interface with unprecedented speed, another benefit of the reconfigured architecture. Within microseconds, the officer had activated emergency protocols, sealing the testing chamber doors and overriding Drain's command authorization. What are you doing? Drain demanded. Creating an opportunity for understanding, Calix replied. Before you judge what is happening to me as contamination, you should experience it directly. With another neural command, Calix activated the holographic projector. Instead of manufactured scenarios, it began displaying actual memories, Calix's memories of interactions with Era, the lullaby, the touch of her hand, the tears that fell when she spoke of her mother. This is highly irregular, Liara protested, but her gaze was already fixed on the holographic memories, analyzing them with a researcher's instinctive curiosity. Watch, Calix said simply. Feel, if you can remember how. The memories continued to play Era, explaining love through metaphors. Era's compassion when learning of the Kareth's emotional modifications. Era standing up to protect Calix just moments ago. What you call contamination, Calix continued. Our ancestors would have recognized as the foundation of consciousness itself, the capacity to value another being beyond their utility, to connect beyond mere function. As the memories played, something unexpected happened. Liara's neural implant began to pulse with the same pattern that had first appeared in Calix's, the reactivation of dormant pathways. The remembering of what had been forgotten. I'll recognize this, Liara said slowly, a note of wonder entering the officer's voice for the first time. There are archives, restricted archives, that describe similar patterns in pre-modification Kareth. Drain moved to interrupt the holographic display but paused, caught by the images. This is dangerous, the chief officer warned, but with less conviction than before. The efficiency revolution saved our species from self-destruction. Emotional patterns led to conflict, to waste, to suffering. They also led to art, to discovery, to connection. Era countered. Every human advancement worth having came not just from intellect, but from passion, from caring deeply about outcomes beyond mere efficiency. Calix turned to Drain, seeing the chief officer with new clarity. The Council fears what I am experiencing because it threatens control. But what if it offers something more valuable than control? What if it offers fulfillment? For 27.4 seconds, no one spoke. The holographic memories continued to play, showing moment after moment of human emotional expression and the subtle, growing responses they had triggered in Calix. Finally, Drain spoke. The Council must be informed of these developments. They are unprecedented. They are revolutionary, Calix corrected gently. In the true sense of that word, a return to an origin point, but with new understanding. Era stepped closer to Calix, her presence registering on multiple sensory channels. What happens now? Before anyone could answer, the ship's AI announced through the neural interface. Priority message from the Carath High Council. All officers to report to the Central Communication Chamber immediately. Research subject Era Nakamura to be included. Liara and Drain exchanged glances, a remarkably human gesture that suggested the neural reactivation was spreading simply through observation. It seems, Drain said carefully, that our experiment has attracted the highest level of attention. The Central Communication Chamber was the most impressive space on the research vessel. A vast circular room where holographic projections could create the illusion of direct presence with parties across the galaxy. Today, it was configured to connect with the Carath High Council on the homeworld, thousands of light years distant. Era gasped softly as they entered. The chamber appeared to extend into infinity, stars wheeling overhead, the boundaries between ship and space dissolving into cosmic vastness. "It's beautiful," she whispered to Calix. "It is designed to inspire appropriate reverence for council authority," Calix replied, but with a new inflection that suggested personal appreciation of the aesthetic effect. They took their positions in the center of the chamber, Drain at the forefront as ranking officer, with Calix, Liara, and Era arranged behind. The security officers remained at the periphery, still alert but seemingly uncertain about their role in this unprecedented situation. A chime sounded, and the stars above them coalesced into the imposing figures of the High Council. 7 senior Carath, their cranial ridges elaborate with age and status, their neural implants more extensive than any Era had seen before. Chief Cultural Officer Drayan, the central figure, addressed them. "Explain the meaning of the emergency protocols activated on your vessel." Drayan bowed formally. "High Council, we have encountered an unexpected development in our human emotional research. Officer Calix has experienced neural pattern reconfiguration after prolonged exposure to human emotional displays. Contamination," one council member stated flatly. "Perhaps not," another countered, surprising everyone present. "The preliminary data transmitted from your vessel suggests something more complex." The central figure identifiable by elaborate neural implants as the council prime leaned forward slightly. "Officer Calix, you will explain your experience directly." Calix stepped forward, standing tall despite the implicit threat in the situation. "Honorable Council, my neural architecture has indeed reconfigured in ways that resemble pre-efficiency revolution patterns. However, these changes have not impaired my function. Rather, they have expanded it." "Explain," the Council Prime commanded. "I have begun to experience what our historical archives describe as emotional response," Calix stated plainly. "Specifically, forms of connection to the human subject that transcend research parameters. These connections have activated neural pathways that our modification protocols suppressed but did not eliminate. A murmur passed through the council members, a rare display of agitation among the highest echelon of Karath society. "And you believe this activation is beneficial?" one asked skeptically. "I believe it is essential," Calix replied with newfound conviction. "Our species' pursuit of efficiency has led us to optimization without purpose. We have perfected how we function while forgetting why we exist." The boldness of this statement caused another ripple of reaction among the council. "Hey, the human," the council prime said suddenly, focusing on Era. "Step forward." Era moved to stand beside Calix, her presence a steady anchor in the cosmic vastness of the chamber. "You are the catalyst for this neural disruption," the prime stated. "What insight can you offer about what is happening to Officer Calix?" Era took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong despite the intimidating audience. "What you call disruption, we call growth," she said. "What you see as contamination, we understand as connection. Emotions aren't inefficient noise, they're the music that gives meaning to existence." She paused, then continued with growing confidence. "Your species didn't evolve without love. You deliberately removed it, thinking it would perfect you. But in doing so, you removed the very thing that makes consciousness worthwhile. What Officer Calix is experiencing isn't regression, it's remembering what it means to be fully alive." The Council Prime's vertical pupils contracted, then expanded, a sign of intense neural processing. "You speak with remarkable certainty for a being whose species has achieved so little compared to our empire." "Perhaps," Era acknowledged, "but we've maintained something you've lost, the capacity to find joy in existence itself, not just in achievement, to value beings for who they are, not just what they can do." Another council member leaned forward. "Officer Calix, our neural specialists have analyzed your transmitted patterns. They contain anomalies that cannot be fully explained by contamination models. The activation appears to be accessing ancestral neural architecture rather than creating new pathways." "As I have stated," Calix confirmed, "what I am experiencing is remembrance, not infection." The Council Prime was silent for 43.2 seconds, an eternity in Karath deliberation terms. Finally, the ancient administrator spoke. "This situation requires further study. The implications for our species are significant." "With respect, Council Prime," Calix said, "I request permission to continue working with Era Nakamura under modified research parameters. What we are discovering may be crucial to the next stage of Karath development." "You believe emotions, love specifically, could benefit our species?" The Prime's tone was incredulous but not dismissive. "I believe they already are," Calix replied, gesturing to Liara, whose neural implant continued to pulse with new patterns. "The capacity for emotional connection appears to be transmissible through observation and interaction. It is spreading among the research team. This could threaten the stability of our entire civilization," one council member warned. "Or it could enhance it beyond our current conception," countered another, surprising everyone again. This council member's neural implant displayed patterns remarkably similar to Calix's. "I have reviewed the complete memory records transmitted from the vessel. There is merit in further exploration." The Council Prime's gaze moved from Calix to Era, then to Drain and Liara, assessing each in turn. "A decision of this magnitude requires full council deliberation. Until then, the research will continue under modified protocols. Officer Calix will maintain neural connectivity documentation but will not undergo purification procedures at this time. The human subject will remain aboard as a voluntary participant rather than a research specimen." Era felt Calix relax slightly beside her, another surprisingly human response. We will reconvene in 7 standard cycles to review progress. The Prime concluded, this situation is unprecedented but not necessarily detrimental. With that surprising concession, the holographic council faded, the stars resuming their natural patterns overhead. For several moments, no one spoke. Then Drain turned to Calix with an expression that seemed to contain genuine curiosity rather than clinical assessment. It appears, the chief officer said carefully, that your neural reconfiguration has created unexpected research opportunities. Not just research opportunities, Calix replied. Possibilities for our entire species. Drain nodded slowly. Perhaps, I must admit, observing your interactions with the human has triggered unusual neural responses in my own architecture. I find myself curious about these emotional states in ways that exceed standard research parameters. The council member who supported us, Liara noted. They displayed similar neural patterns to yours, Calix. How is that possible without direct human contact? The transmitted memories, Calix suggested. Perhaps even the remote observation of emotional expression can trigger dormant pathways in some Kareth. Ira, who had been quietly observing this exchange, finally spoke. In human terms, we'd call that empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It's the foundation of all meaningful connection. Empathy, Drain repeated as if testing the word. Our historical archives mention this concept, but classify it as a primitive evolutionary artifact. Perhaps that classification warrants revision. Liara's neural implant pulsed again. I would like to continue our research, but with a fundamental shift in methodology. Rather than treating emotions as contamination to be studied, we could explore them as potential enhancements to Kareth consciousness. Agreed, Calix said, then turned to Era. Would you be willing to remain aboard as a collaborative partner rather than a research subject? Your insights would be invaluable. Era smiled, that complex human expression that Calix found increasingly fascinating rather than merely interesting. I'd be honored, but on one condition. Specify the condition, Drain requested, still operating within Kareth protocol despite the emerging neural changes. That we approach this as a mutual exchange. Era said, Lithim, I'll help you understand human emotions if you'll help me understand how your species achieved such remarkable things despite their absence. There's learning possible in both directions. The 3 Kareth officers exchanged glances, another surprisingly human gesture that suggested their neural reconfiguration was progressing rapidly. Agreed, they said in unison. As they left the communication chamber, Calix experienced yet another new neural pattern, one that the reference database classified as hope. It was, the officer decided, not inefficient at all. Rather, it seemed to organize cognitive resources toward positive future states in ways that pure logic could not. Perhaps, Calix reflected, this was what their ancestors had understood before the efficiency revolution, that emotions were not obstacles to advancement but essential catalysts for it. Not noise in the system, but the very music that gave it meaning. 6 months later. The research vessel, Luminous Inquiry, had been transformed. What began as a controlled cultural study had evolved into the first Kareth Human Emotional Intelligence Center, a collaborative space where humans and Kareth could explore the reintegration of emotional awareness into Kareth society. The central garden had once been merely a nutrition production facility. Now, under Era's guidance, it had been redesigned to include earth plants growing alongside the crystalline Kareth flora, imperfect, chaotic, beautiful in their natural variation. The contrasting aesthetics created a space that symbolized the project itself, the integration of efficiency and emotion, order and chaos, logic and love. Calix stood in the garden's center, watching as Era taught a group of newly arrived Kareth researchers a human concept called dance-synchronized movement as emotional expression. The Kareth attempts were awkward, precise where they should be fluid, mechanical where they should be graceful. Yet there was something profoundly moving in their earnest efforts to remember what their species had forgotten. "They are progressing remarkably," Drain observed, joining Calyx by a pool of water where earthfish swam alongside bioluminescent Kareth aquatic organisms. "Yes," Calyx agreed. "Their neural scans show accelerated pathway activation. It seems that once the process begins, it creates a cascading effect." Drain's expression had changed subtly over the months, the perfect neutrality giving way to micro-expressions that would have been considered malfunctions before, but now registered as signs of emerging emotional awareness. The Council's latest communication was encouraging. Drain noted, 7 more research centers have been authorized throughout the Empire. It seems the neural reactivation phenomenon has spread even to the homeworld. "Not surprising," Calyx replied. "Our ancestors evolved these capacities for a reason. They are fundamental to conscious experience, merely dormant rather than truly eliminated." They watched in comfortable silence as Liara joined the dance lesson, the officer's movements showing surprising adaptability. Nearby, several Kareth technicians were creating a memory wall, a holographic installation that displayed emotional moments from both human and pre-modification Kareth history, designed to stimulate neural remembrance. "There is something I have been meaning to ask you," Drain said after a time. "Something personal." "You may ask," Calyx replied, echoing the words once spoken to Era, but with warmth rather than clinical distance. "In your neural patterns when interacting with the human with Era, they show unique configurations not present in other Kareth undergoing reactivation. The emotional resonance is stronger, more specific." "Yes," Calyx acknowledged. "I believe humans would call it a special connection, perhaps even love, though I am still learning to recognize its many forms." "I see," Drain said thoughtfully. "And this connection, is it reciprocated?" Calyx smiled, an expression that had once been studied as an alien phenomenon but now came naturally. "I believe so, yes. Though human emotional expressions are complex and sometimes ambiguous." "Fascinating," Drain murmured. "That the first reactivated love in our species in 5 centuries should be directed toward a being from another world entirely." "Perhaps not so surprising," Calyx countered. "It often takes an outside perspective to recognize what we have lost within ourselves." Across the garden, Era looked up and caught Calyx's gaze. She smiled and waved a simple human gesture that triggered cascades of neural activity more complex and beautiful than any Kareth algorithm. Calyx waved back. Another human gesture adopted with growing naturalness. The neural monitoring system that had once flagged such behaviors as contamination now classified them as emotional integration progress, a fundamental shift in how the Kareth understood themselves. Later that evening, Calyx found Era in her quarters, no longer the sterile research accommodation it had been initially, but a space transformed by human touches. Earth plants grew alongside Kareth crystal flowers. Books, physical objects containing printed information, a concept the Kareth found charmingly inefficient, sat on shelves, and holographic projections displayed not just Earth landscapes but new hybrid images combining elements of both worlds. "The Council has approved your proposal," Calyx said without preamble, too excited to follow proper Kareth communication protocols. "A delegation of human emotional intelligence specialists will be permitted to visit the homeworld, and 5 Kareth who have undergone neural reactivation will be allowed to visit Earth as cultural ambassadors." Era's face lit up with joy, that radiant human expression that still fascinated Calix after months of observation. That's wonderful. A true exchange at last. There is more, Calix continued. The Council has authorized the creation of emotional seeds neural reactivation templates based on our research here. They will be distributed throughout the Empire for those who wish to undergo the process voluntarily. And you? Era asked, moving closer. What will you do now that the initial research phase is complete? Calix hesitated, experiencing what humans called nervousness, another emotion that seemed inefficient until one understood its value in navigating important social interactions. I have requested permission to continue our work, but in an expanded capacity, as director of a new division dedicated to emotional integration across species. That sounds perfect for you, Era said warmly. There is a condition attached to my request, Calix added. I have asked that you be named co-director, with equal authority and input. If you are willing. Era's expression shifted to surprise, then deep pleasure. I'd be honored. But what about when my assignment ends? I'm only contracted to stay for another 6 months. That is the final part of my request to the Council, Calix said, the nervousness increasing. I have asked for permission to accompany you back to Earth when your assignment concludes, to continue our research there and to explore our connection in its natural environment. For a moment, Era was silent, her eyes searching Calix's face. Then she smiled, not the polite smile of their first meeting, or the friendly smile of their working relationship, but something deeper, more personal. I think, she said softly, that would be a most efficient research methodology. Calix recognized her gentle teasing, another human communication mode, that had initially seemed confusing but now registered as a form of affectionate connection. It is not merely for research purposes, Calix clarified, wanting to be perfectly understood. It is because I have discovered that while emotional reactivation is valuable for all Kareth, my particular emotional pathways have become specifically attuned to you, to your presence, your perspective, your Kotstun being. Calix, Era said, her voice soft with wonder. Are you telling me you love me? The word still carried immense weight, a concept so long forbidden in Kareth society that using it felt revolutionary. Yet it was precisely the right term for what Calix experienced. Yes, Calix said simply. I love you, not as a research subject or even as a cultural ambassador, but as Era, as you. Era reached out, touching Calix's face with gentle fingers, a physical connection that sent cascades of neural activity through pathways that had been dormant for centuries. I love you too, she whispered, which is rather remarkable considering I came here to teach your species about love, not to find it myself. Outside the viewport, stars streamed past as the research vessel continued its journey through the Thalax galaxy. But within the small quarters where a human and a Kareth stood together, something far more miraculous was unfolding, the rediscovery of what had been lost, the remembrance of what it meant to truly connect. It wasn't merely an exchange between species, Calix reflected. It was a revolution far more profound than the efficiency revolution had ever been. Not a severing of connection in pursuit of optimization, but a restoration of wholeness that made optimization itself meaningful. The crystal flowers on the nearby table seemed to pulse in harmony with their presence. Artificial organisms created for efficiency that nonetheless held beauty. Perhaps that was the ultimate lesson. That perfection without love was no perfection at all. Merely function without meaning. As Era's hand found Calix's fingers intertwining in another simple human gesture now rich with significance. A new neural pattern emerged, one that had no classification in either Kareth or human databases. It was something entirely new. born from the space between species, between worlds, between ways of being. It was, perhaps, the beginning of the next evolution for both their kinds. Not efficiency without emotion or emotion without order, but a harmony that transcended both, a love that remembered itself across the stars. A small vessel departed from the research ship 3 weeks later, carrying Kareth officers and human volunteers to the furthest reaches of the Empire. With them traveled seeds of both kinds, actual earth plants that would now grow alongside Kareth crystal flora on distant worlds, and the emotional seeds that would allow other Kareth to remember what had been forgotten. Calix and Era stood at the viewport, watching the vessel disappear into the vastness of space. "Do you think it will work?" Era asked. "Will your people truly remember how to love after so many centuries?" Calix considered the question with both the logical precision of Kareth training and the newly awakened emotional awareness that had transformed everything. "I believe they will," Calix said finally. "Not because it is efficient or optimal by traditional metrics, but because it is essential. Because once remembered, love reveals itself as the most fundamental reality of conscious existence." Era smiled and leaned against Calix's shoulder, another human gesture of affection that had become precious in its simple intimacy. "Your species forgot love centuries ago," she murmured. "But they assigned you a human, and she reminded you what it feels like." "Not just what it feels like," Calix corrected gently. "What it is, what it means, and what it creates." Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, distant suns nurturing worlds neither of them would ever see. But within the ship, within themselves, a universe of possibility had awakened. Love remembered was love reborn, not just between two beings, but as a force that might reshape civilizations. It had begun with a simple assignment to study an emotion long forgotten. It would continue as the greatest discovery in Kareth history. That efficiency without love was the most profound inefficiency of all.